We were talking about higher ed and your son at Clemson, and I think it's one, in a macro sense, it's a huge issue because we're in a global competition for jobs, capital, and way of life. But as much as anything, our ability to compete in that global world will be driven by, basically leveraging human capacity. And the only two ways of leveraging human capacity. One is through gray power and what you have to offer in terms of intellectual output. And the other is through traditional investment. In other words, one person on a backhoe can dig a lot more dirt than a bunch of folks with shovels. And so this idea that, folks in politics all day long will talk about higher standard of living, higher standard of living. The question is how do you get there? Savings drives investment, which drives productivity gain, which will ultimately impact standard of living. So I think it's incredibly important, particularly given the fact that, the United States is now 20% of world GDP. In other words, 80% of the economic activity in the globe is taking place somewhere else. And it underscores the importance of having something extra that you offer in this country. And we cannot take it for granted. I mean, I remember a trade trip to China, met with a bunch of folks, and they had computer screens one after another, almost as far as you could see in this room. And I remember going to them, I said, what's going on here? Well, we're doing CAD/CAM activity for a manufacturing facility. We're going to do the low value added work back in the United States. We're going to do the high value added CAD/CAM work here in China. That's a scary proposition, and it underscores again the vital link between education capacity and ultimately standard of living. We work on it very hard, and again, you could have a longer conversation with Tom on that front, but we have a failed system, for instance, in South Carolina. I don't think that the federal government can do a lot. Certainly you have Pell Grants and you have a variety of different financial assistances, but it pales in comparison to the actual cost of education at the state level. So there's a thing called the HEPI Index, the Higher Education Pricing Index, and if you look at the HEPI Index, it has well outpaced the growth rate in inflation in this country. And so if you really want to have an impact, you got to impact the degree to which there's rampant price escalation in higher ed. And one of the reasons, for instance, we have rampant price escalation in higher ed here in South Carolina is that we don't have a contained system. In other words, you got every tech school out there wanting to be a two-year college, every two-year college wanting to be a four-year college, a lot of four-year colleges wanting to be research universities, and research universities being I'm not sure what. And so I think that you really got to look at this idea of, think about an aircraft carrier. There may be 5,000 people in an aircraft carrier, but the reason that they produce such extraordinary results with regular folks is that everybody knows their role, and the person down in to the ship, helping to run the nuclear generator, isn't trying to be the captain, and the person that's out there on the flight line, in a red or a purple uniform, is not trying to be the nuclear engineer. And we didn't do that here in South Carolina, and so we tried to impose upon our state an ordered system so that you could then be the best that you could be, but you knew your role. It met with just disaster. There is nothing worse in politics than trying to go against an alumni association that sends out 80,000 newsletters each week. It's not a good political formula. But if you go to Sumter, for instance, I got criticized because we fought the idea of the two-year school there to a four-year school because this is getting impossible. Anyway, the bottom line is, I think we have to go to something along the lines of a board of regents system, which Florida has, a number of other states have. We have a very high, in other words, you look at our numbers in the Southeast, we're highest in the Southeast in what we ask of the student and the parents. We're basically highest in the Southeast in what we ask of the taxpayer as a percentage of our budget. Something's wrong with that formula. I think we've got to look at ending a lot of the duplication, which would come with a board of regents system. That's a prescription for South Carolina, but I think each state needs to handle it on their own. That's the one I'd recommend here in South Carolina.
Okay, we are long past